They said his body would destroy any woman who tried to claim him. They said the broken Omega was too weak to survive. But they were wrong. The Alpha King wasn't cursed. He was waiting for the one brave enough to choose him. The Grand Throne Room of Ironhall had seen coronations, executions, and wars declared within its stone walls. But it had never witnessed this. 23 times in 5 years, this exact ceremony.
On my life.
23 women, 23 failures. Draven Ashenfell stood at the center of the hall, 7 feet of scarred muscle and absolute stillness. His massive frame cast shadows across the marble floor, where 600 witnesses packed the space, their whispers echoing off vaulted ceilings. He wore formal armor polished to mirror shine, but beneath the ceremony, beneath the crown that sat heavy on his dark hair, lived a truth that had broken him piece by piece. He was their king, and he was alone. Isolde Ravenmark entered through the eastern archway, a vision in silver silk that caught torchlight like water. 28 years old, daughter of the wealthiest noble house in the Northern Territories, educated in 7 languages, beautiful in the way that made men stupid. She walked with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. Her golden hair fell in perfect waves down her back. Her smile was practiced, pleasant, empty. The high priest's voice boomed across the hall. "We gather to witness the royal bonding examination. Should Lady Isolde prove compatible, the union will proceed. Should she not, the search continues." Draven had stopped hoping at bride number 12. Now he simply endured. The examination chamber was connected to the throne room by a short corridor, private but not silent. Whatever happened there, the court would hear. They always heard. Isolde's hand felt small in his as he led her through the doorway. She was still smiling. They always smiled at first. He'd learned not to let himself believe it would be different this time. The chamber was simple. A bed covered in white linen, candles that did nothing to warm the stone. A physician waited in the corner, ancient and expressionless. Protocol demanded his presence. Protocol demanded everything. Draven turned to face Isolde. She was tall for a woman nearly 6 feet, but she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Amber eyes that had witnessed battlefields, that had learned to hide pain so deep it had no bottom. "My lady, I need to tell you something before we proceed." His voice was quiet, careful. He'd practiced these words so many times, they felt like a script. Isolde's smile faltered, just slightly. "The royal bloodline, the first alphas, they bred true. Too true. Everything about me is disproportionate. The physicians measured when I came of age. They said no Omega could." He couldn't finish. He never could. Isolde's face had already changed. The smile was gone. Her eyes dropped, curious despite herself. And then, the scream shattered the quiet. She stumbled backward, hand flying to her mouth, silver dress pooling around her feet as she lost her balance. The physician caught her before she hit the floor. Her eyes were wide, pupils dilated with shock. "No, no, that's not possible. That's not—" Her breath came in gasps. Draven stood perfectly still. He'd learned not to move. Movement made it worse. Movement made them think he was dangerous. "I tried to warn you, my lady. I always try. Get away from me." Isolde's voice climbed to hysteria. She clawed at the physician's robes, trying to put distance between herself and Draven, as if proximity alone could hurt her. The doors burst open. Council members flooded in, drawn by her screams like sharks to blood. Cassian Ashenfell led them. Draven's cousin, older by 5 years, handsome in a way that Draven had never been. His dark eyes gleamed with something that might have been concern if you didn't know him well enough to recognize satisfaction. "What happened, Isolde? Are you hurt?" Cassian pulled her away from Draven, protective, theatrical. The perfect hero. Isolde was sobbing now, mascara streaking down her perfect face. "He's a monster. How can the kingdom expect any woman to endure that? It's impossible. It's cruel." The physician stepped forward, his voice clinical and damning. "The genetic anomaly is extreme. I can confirm what the previous 22 examinations concluded. The king's proportions are beyond the capacity of normal human mating. Any attempt would result in severe trauma." Silence fell like an executioner's blade. Draven closed his eyes, just for a moment, just long enough to push the shame down deep where it lived festering. When he opened them again, the council had assembled. Thaddeus Ironborn, the royal advisor, looked ancient and exhausted. Ragnar Stormforge, the general, stared at the floor. 12 other faces, some sympathetic, some calculating, all witnessing his humiliation. Again. Cassian's voice rang out clear and authoritative. "This cannot continue. 23 attempts. 23 failures. The kingdom needs an heir. The throne needs stability. We must face the truth. King Draven is physically incapable of fulfilling his duty to produce royal offspring." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the council. Draven's jaw clenched. He'd heard variations of this speech before, but Cassian had never been this bold. "I propose a vote. Should the king be deemed unfit to continue the royal line, the crown should pass to the Beta bloodline, for the good of Ironhall. Thaddeus's cane struck the floor with a sharp crack. You overstep, Cassian. This is not a matter for council vote. The king's personal challenges do not negate his right to rule. But the damage was done. The seed was planted. Isolde was escorted from the chamber, still weeping. The council dispersed in clusters, whispering. Cassian lingered, his expression carefully neutral. Cousin, I speak only out of concern. Perhaps it's time to consider alternatives. Draven's voice came out low, controlled, lethal. Get out. Cassian smiled, just slightly. Then he left. The throne room emptied. 600 witnesses carried the story to every corner of the kingdom. By nightfall, everyone would know. Again. Draven stood alone in the examination chamber. 7 feet tall, stronger than any 10 men trained in combat since childhood, victor of the Northern Wars, protector of the realm. Completely, utterly powerless. He made his way through the castle's corridors, ignoring the servants who pressed themselves against walls to let him pass, ignoring the whispers that followed like ghosts. He climbed stairs meant for normal-sized men, his shoulders brushing stone on both sides. The East Wing was his prison. Beautiful, lonely, silent. His chambers were vast enough to accommodate his frame. A bed custom-built, reinforced to hold his weight. Weapons mounted on walls. Maps of conquered territories. Everything a king should want. Nothing he needed. Draven moved to the window, looking out over Ironhall. The city sprawled below, thousands of lives continuing unaware, unconcerned. Smoke rose from chimneys. Market stalls closed for the evening. Somewhere people laughed. He pressed his forehead against the cold glass. 30 years old. 5 years searching for a mate. 23 rejections. The physicians said it was genetic. A mutation in the alpha bloodline that had been dormant for generations activated in him. They used words like abnormal, excessive, incompatible. They measured and documented and concluded he was broken in a way that couldn't be fixed. Every woman who discovered the truth ran. Some screamed, some cried, some laughed as if he were a cosmic joke. Bride number 4 had fainted. Number 9 had vomited. Number 17 had looked at him with such disgust he'd nearly ended it all that night. Isolde had screamed the loudest. Draven's hands curled into fists against the window frame. The wood creaked under pressure. He'd learned to control his strength early, had to. A child with his power could kill someone by accident. So he'd spent his entire life holding back, measuring every movement, making himself smaller, quieter, less. It hadn't mattered. He was still too much. The irony wasn't lost on him. An Alpha King, the most powerful man in the realm, feared and respected by enemies and allies alike, reduced to this. Alone. Unwanted. Told repeatedly that his body, the very thing that made him king, made him unlovable. Draven grabbed his cloak and left the castle through the servants' entrance. He couldn't breathe in there anymore. The Frostwood Forest bordered the eastern edge of the Royal Hunting Preserve. Ancient trees, dense undergrowth, the kind of wilderness that reminded him he was still just a man, crown or not. He walked without direction, boots crunching through late autumn leaves. The cold helped. The silence helped. Out here, there was no one to recoil from him, no eyes full of pity or disgust. Just trees that didn't care about genetic anomalies or failed bonding ceremonies. He didn't know how long he walked. Hours, maybe. The sun dipped below the tree line, painting everything gold and crimson. That's when he heard the scream. Lyric Winters had learned 3 things in her 23 years. First, the world was cruel. Second, the strong devoured the weak. Third, survival required becoming invisible. She'd failed at the third thing. The trafficking auction took place in a warehouse on the outskirts of the city, far from decent people and the law. Lyric stood on a platform with 12 other Omegas, all of them thin, all of them bruised, all of them trying not to cry down. Victor Cross circled them like a predator evaluating prey. 60 years old, wealthy from decades of buying and selling human beings protected by bribes and fear. He stopped in front of him. Lyric grabbed her chin, forced her head up. This one's damaged goods. Look at those scars. His fingers pressed bruises into her jaw. Lyric kept her eyes down. Meeting his gaze meant punishment. Victor turned to the crowd of buyers. Defective merchandise. Started the bidding at 50 silver. 50, less than the cost of a decent horse. Lyric's stomach churned. A man in the back raised his hand. Lord Harwick. She'd heard the other Omegas whisper his name with terror. He bought slaves to work his mines where they died within months from exhaustion and cave-ins. 50 silver for the scarred one. Victor nodded. Sold. Just like that, her life traded for coins. They branded her that night. Harwick's mark burned into her left shoulder blade while she bit down on leather to keep from screaming. The smell of her own burning flesh made her vomit. They laughed. The transport happened 3 days later. Lyric and 6 other Omegas were chained together in a wagon heading north to the mines. She'd been planning her escape since the moment they'd shackled her. The wagon crossed a river at dusk. The driver was drunk. Lyric had stolen a nail days ago, hidden it in her mouth. While the wagon bounced over rough terrain, she worked the nail into her shackles lock. Her wrist bled from the effort. The lock clicked open. She waited until they reached the forest road, waited until the driver looked away. Then she rolled off the wagon's back, hit the ground hard, and ran. Shouts erupted behind her. The driver's whip cracked. Lyric didn't look back. She ran into the frostwood branches, tearing at her face roots, trying to trip her lungs burning. She ran until the voices faded. She ran until she couldn't hear anything but her own heartbeat. She ran until her legs gave out and she collapsed against the tree, gasping. Freedom. It lasted exactly 10 minutes. The cold hit her like a fist. She'd escaped in nothing but a thin cotton dress, no shoes, no supplies. The temperature was dropping fast. Autumn this far north meant frost, meant hypothermia, meant death. Lyric forced herself to stand. She needed shelter, water, fire. She found a stream, first ice cold and clear. She drank until her stomach cramped, then followed it deeper into the forest. The sun disappeared. Darkness fell, absolute and suffocating. She heard the wolves before she saw them. A low growl close. Too close. Lyric's head snapped up. 5 pairs of eyes reflected moonlight. The pack spread out, surrounding her, cutting off escape routes. The alpha wolf was massive, scarred across the muzzle experience. Lyric's hands shook. She had no weapon, no way to fight. The tree behind her was an ancient oak, wide trunk, low branches. She jumped, caught the lowest branch, hauled herself up with strength born of pure terror. Her palms scraped against bark, bleeding. She climbed higher. The wolves circled below, waiting. Lyric wedged herself into a fork between 2 branches and tried not to shake hard enough to fall. The night stretched endless. The cold seeped into her bones. Below, the alpha wolf settled down to wait. They were patient. They knew she'd have to come down eventually. She counted her heartbeats, tried to stay awake. If she fell asleep, she'd fall, and falling meant teeth and blood, and a death that would be faster than freezing, but no less final. The temperature dropped further. Lyric's lips turned blue. Her fingers went numb. She couldn't feel her toes anymore. She thought about her mother who'd sold her to pay gambling debts, her father who'd looked away, the holding cells where Victor kept his merchandise, the brand on her shoulder, the life she'd never get to live. Somewhere around midnight, she started hallucinating, saw her mother standing below the tree, calling her name, saw warmth, saw food, saw impossible safety. Dawn came slow and gray. The wolves finally left, bored or called by some other prey. Lyric tried to climb down and discovered her hands wouldn't work. Her legs were cramping. She was so cold she couldn't stop shaking. She fell. The impact drove air from her lungs. She lay on the frozen ground, staring at sky through bare branches, unable to move. This was it then. She'd escaped slavery just to die alone in the woods. At least it was her choice. Lyric closed her eyes. That's when she heard footsteps. Draven had been walking for hours when he heard the scream. Short, sharp, cut off suddenly. Direction was hard to pinpoint in the forest, but he was a trained tracker. He followed the sound. He found the stream first, then the ancient oak tree, then the crumpled figure at its base. A woman, young, unconscious. Her lips were blue with cold. She wore nothing but a thin dress torn to rags. No shoes. Her feet were bleeding. Cuts covered her arms and face from branches. And on her left shoulder blade, barely visible through ripped fabric, a fresh brand, still red and angry. Draven knelt beside her, careful not to jostle her. He pressed 2 fingers to her throat. Pulse there faint but steady. She was dying. Hypothermia, exposure, exhaustion. Without intervention, she had maybe an hour. Draven didn't think. He stripped off his cloak, wrapped her in it, lifted her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing. Fragile bones, malnourished, barely more than a child. His castle was 2 miles away. The royal physician could help. If he ran, if she held on, if he didn't drop her, maybe, he ran. The forest blurred around him. His massive strides ate distance, each footfall precise even in darkness. The woman's head lolled against his chest. She didn't wake. Draven burst through the castle's eastern entrance, shouting for the physician. Servants scattered in alarm. He climbed stairs 3 at a time, kicked open the door to the healing ward. The physician appeared, took one look, and started barking orders. They laid her on a bed, stripped away the ruined dress, packed her in heated blankets. The physician worked quickly, checking vitals, cleaning wounds, muttering about frostbite and infection. Will she live? Draven's voice came out rougher than intended. The physician glanced up. Maybe. Her body temperature is dangerously low. The brand is infected. She's severely malnourished, but she's young and she fought hard to survive this long. If she makes it through the night, she has a chance. Draven nodded. He should leave. Let the physician work. Return to his chambers in his self-imposed isolation. He didn't move. He stood in the doorway and watched this broken stranger fight for breath, and something in his chest that had been dead for years flickered. She didn't wake that night or the next day. Draven returned to the healing ward 6 times, always finding excuses, checking on the physician's needs, ensuring proper care, lying to himself about why he couldn't stay away. On the 3rd day, her eyes opened. Draven happened to be there sitting in a chair he'd pulled to the corner, trying to be invisible despite his size. He saw the exact moment consciousness returned, saw her eyes pale gray like winter storms focus on the ceiling, saw panic flash across her face. She tried to sit up. Her body protested. She gasped. Easy. Draven stood, hands raised, non-threatening. You're safe. You're in Iron Hall Castle, the Royal Healing Ward. No one's going to hurt you. Her eyes found him, went wide. He was used to that reaction. Fear, shock. He started to back away to give her space to make himself smaller. You saved me. Her voice was hoarse, barely a whisper, but the words stopped him cold. You were dying. Anyone would have. No. She pushed herself up on her elbows, wincing. Anyone would have left me. You didn't. Silence stretched between them. Draven didn't know how to respond. Gratitude was foreign territory. She studied him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable, taking in his height, his scars, the way he stood angled toward the door like he might bolt. What's your name? Draven. I'm Lyric. She paused. Where are we exactly? The castle, Iron Hall, the capital. Her face went pale. Capital meant law. Law meant she'd be returned to Harwick. I need to leave, right now. They'll come looking for me, and if they find me here, who will Lord Harwick? I'm his property. You're not property. Draven's voice hardened. You're a person, and you're under my protection. Who are you to offer protection? The king. Lyric stared at him, then laughed sharp and bitter. Of course you are. The universe has a cruel sense of humor. She fell back against the pillows, exhausted by the brief exchange. Her hands shook. Draven noticed the wounds on her wrists, circular from shackles. Noticed the brand on her shoulder. Harwick's mark burned deep. Rage built slow and cold in his chest, the kind that didn't explode but rather froze everything it touched. Tell me what happened. So she did. In halting sentences, eyes fixed on the ceiling, Lyric told him about the auction, the branding, the escape. She told him about the river and the wagon and running until her lungs bled, about the wolves and the tree and accepting death. Draven listened without interrupting. When she finished, her eyes were wet but no tears fell. He recognized that kind of strength, the kind that refused to break in front of witnesses. Harwick will be dealt with, he said quietly. Victor Cross's operation will be shut down. You're free. Why? Lyric's eyes cut to him, searching. Why do you care what happens to some Omega slave? Because I know what it's like to be treated as less than human, he thought. Because your worth was measured and found wanting by people who never bothered to see you. But he couldn't say that. So instead, because it's the right thing to do. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Thank you. The physician returned, shooed Draven out, insisted Lyric needed rest. Draven left, but he came back the next day, and the day after, always finding excuses, always staying longer than necessary. Lyric healed slowly. The frostbite faded, the cuts closed, the infection in her brand responded to treatment. Color returned to her face. She started eating more than broth. And they talked, small things at first, safe topics, the weather, the castle's history, books she'd never learned to read, then deeper. Her childhood before her parents sold her, his isolation after the rejections, her years in Victor's cells, his impossible search for a mate. A week after she woke, Lyric asked the question, why can't you find someone? They were in the healing ward's small library. Draven had been reading to her a history of the Northern Territories. He set the book down. It's complicated. Most important things are, he sighed, looked at his hands scarred and massive. I'm not built right. The royal bloodline, the alpha genetics, something went wrong. My body is disproportionate. The physicians say no Omega could safely bond with me. 23 women have tried. All of them failed. Lyric frowned. Failed how? They couldn't endure the physical reality of me. Some screamed, some ran, some laughed. His voice went flat. All of them made it clear I was a monster. Silence. Then Lyric said something that shattered him. Did any of them try? Draven's head snapped up. What? Did any of them actually try, or did they just look and decide you were too much without giving you a chance? He opened his mouth, closed it, realized he didn't have an answer. They were scared, he said finally. Fear is understandable, but did they talk to you? Ask how it might work? Try to find a way together? Lyric leaned forward. Or did they see size and assume violence? The question hit like a blade between ribs. Clean, precise, devastating. Draven's voice cracked. I don't know. I think they gave up on you before they started, and I think you let them because you'd already given up on yourself. Tears burned behind his eyes. He forced them back. Kings didn't cry. You don't understand. You can't. The physicians confirmed it. I'm broken. You're different, Lyric corrected. That's not the same thing. She stood, walked over to where he sat, and did something no one had done in years. She took his hand, her fingers barely wrapped around two of his small and pale against his scarred skin. Size doesn't determine worth, Draven. Gentleness does. Control does. I've seen real monsters. You're not one of them. Draven stared at their joined hands, felt the warmth of her skin, the steady pressure of her grip, the absolute absence of fear. How can you not be afraid? Because you gave me a choice. You could have left me in that forest. You could have taken advantage when I was helpless. You could have returned me to Harwick for the bounty. You did none of those things. Her gray eyes met his amber ones. That's not a monster. That's a man who's forgotten he deserves to be loved. Something inside him crumbled. Years of shame, of isolation, of believing he was fundamentally wrong. It all cracked under the weight of her simple truth. Lyric, a knock at the door interrupted. Thaddeus entered looking grim. My king, forgive the intrusion. The council demands an audience. Cassian has been rallying support for a vote of succession. He's claiming your inability to produce an heir makes you unfit to rule. Draven stood, his hand slipping from Lyric's. Let them vote. They've been wanting to for years. My king. Thaddeus, I'm tired. I've spent 5 years trying to be acceptable. Maybe it's time to accept I'm not. He walked toward the door, shoulders heavy with defeat. Behind him, Lyric's voice rang out clear and strong. Don't you dare give up now. He turned. She'd stood from her chair, bandages still visible under her borrowed dress, feet still wrapped from frostbite. Tiny and fierce and absolutely unafraid. They want you to believe you're broken so they can take what's yours. Don't let them. I am broken. No. She crossed to him, had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. You're exactly who you're supposed to be. And if they can't see that, it says everything about them and nothing about you. Draven looked down at this woman who'd survived trafficking, slavery, wolves, and winter, who'd fought death itself and won, who looked at him and saw a king instead of a monster. Stay, he said quietly. Please, I'll make arrangements. You'll have rooms, protection, anything you need. Why? Because I'm not ready to be alone again. The honesty of it hung between them. Vulnerable, desperate, true. Lyric's hand found his again. Then I'll stay. That night, Draven made the announcement. Lyric Winters was under royal protection as his ward. Anyone who touched her would answer to him personally. The court whispered, scandalized. Cassian smiled, seeing opportunity. Isolde in her family's northern estate heard the news and felt something dark and jealous coil in her chest. And Lyric, in rooms 5 doors down from the king's chambers, sat on a bed softer than clouds and wondered if she'd finally found something worth fighting for, or if this was just another cage with prettier bars. She worked in the healing ward now officially. Thaddeus had arranged it, claiming her survival skills warranted formal training. The truth was simpler. Lyric needed purpose, and Draven needed her to have a reason to stay that didn't sound like loneliness. The other healers treated her with cautious respect. She was an Omega Gutter-born, scarred, branded, but she was also under the king's protection, which made her untouchable and therefore fascinating. Lyric learned quickly how to set broken bones, stitch wounds without leaving ugly scars, mix medicines that dulled pain without stealing consciousness. She had steady hands and a memory that cataloged every instruction, every herb, every treatment. The head healer, an elderly woman named Marin, watched her work with approving eyes. You have a gift, child. Where did you learn to remain calm under pressure? Lyric threaded a needle, preparing to close a soldier's gash. When you've been hurt enough times, you learn to separate yourself from pain. Makes it easier to treat others. Marin's expression softened with understanding that came from experience. The soldier on the table groaned. Lyric leaned close, her voice gentle. This will sting, but I'll be quick. Count your breaths. In for 3, out for 3. Focus on that, not the needle. She worked with precision born of necessity. The soldier's breathing steadied. When she finished, the stitches were small, even barely visible. You're better at this than half my senior healers, Marin murmured. And you've been here less than a month. Lyric cleaned her hands in the basin. I had good motivation to learn. Dead people can't escape. The darkness in the statement made Marin flinch. But she didn't pry. Everyone in Iron Hall carried damage. Some just wore it closer to the surface. Draven visited the healing ward every evening. Never announced, never demanding attention. He'd slip in through the back entrance, find whatever corner Lyric occupied, and simply exist in her proximity. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence while she worked and he read. Sometimes he brought books from the library, beautiful leather-bound volumes she'd never dreamed of touching, and read aloud while she organized supplies. His voice was deep, resonant, perfect for storytelling. She loved the way he brought words to life, giving each character distinct inflection, pausing for dramatic effect, checking to see if she was still listening. She always was. Tonight he read from a collection of ancient poetry, love poems mostly, written by alphas for their mates, full of flowery language about eternal devotion and souls recognizing each other across lifetimes. Lyric listened while grinding herbs into powder, the mortar and pestle's rhythm matching the cadence of his reading. Do you believe in that? She asked during a pause. Fated mate souls designed for each other. Draven closed the book carefully. I used to. When I was younger, before the rejection started, I thought if I waited long enough, searched hard enough, I'd find someone who fit. He smiled, bitter and tired. Then I realized I'm the piece that doesn't fit anywhere. Lyric set down the pestle, wiped her hands on her apron, crossed to where he sat in a chair designed for smaller men, his frame overflowing it. Maybe fitting isn't the point. What is then, Tun? Choosing. Fitting implies you're passive, waiting for some cosmic force to slot you into place. Choosing means you decide someone is worth the effort even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Draven looked at her with something raw in his amber eyes. Is that what you did, choose to stay here? Yes. Why? The question hung between them, weighted with everything unspoken. Lyric could lie, could say she needed the protection, the work, the safety. All true. All incomplete. Instead, she told him the truth. Because you see me, not the brand, not the scars, not the broken Omega everyone else sees. You see Lyric. And I'd rather be seen by one person who matters than invisible to 1,000 who don't. Draven stood slowly, carefully, the way he always moved around her. Conscious of his size, his strength, the space he occupied, he reached out his massive hand, cupping her face with impossible gentleness. I see you, he whispered. Every day, every moment. I see you. The kiss happened inevitably like gravity. His lips met hers, careful questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She didn't. She leaned into him, hands finding the front of his shirt, rising on her toes to close the distance. He tasted like the tea he'd been drinking, bergamot and honey. His hand slid to the back of her neck, fingers tangling in her hair. The other hand remained at his side, fisted, restraining himself. Always restraining. Lyric pulled back just enough to speak against his mouth. You can touch me, Draven. I won't break. I might. His voice cracked on the words. She understood then. He wasn't afraid of hurting her. He was afraid of wanting her too much, needing her too desperately, proving all those women right by losing control. Then break, she said fiercely. I'd rather have you broken and real than perfect and distant. The sound he made was half laugh, half sob. He kissed her again, deeper this time, less careful. His arms came around her, lifting her off the ground as if she weighed nothing. She wrapped her legs around his waist, felt the rapid thunder of his heartbeat against hers. The door to the healing ward slammed open. They broke apart. Draven set Lyric down quickly, stepping between her and the entrance on instinct. Protective. Automatic. Isolde Ravenmark stood in the doorway, backlit by quarter torches, beautiful and furious. She'd returned to Iron Hall 3 days ago, ostensibly to attend her cousin's wedding. In reality, everyone knew why. The king had taken a ward, a nobody, an Omega with no family, no title, no worth. And the rumors said he cared for her. Isolde's green eyes cut from Draven to Lyric and back again. Her lips curved into something that might have been a smile, if smiles could draw blood. How touching, the monster king and his pet. Draven's voice went cold. Leave now. I don't think so. Isolde glided into the room, silk skirts whispering against stone. See, I've been thinking about our failed bonding, about why you rejected me. You rejected me, Draven corrected quietly, because you're a freak of nature, Because no woman in her right mind would willingly endure what you're hiding under those carefully tailored clothes. She turned her attention to Lyric, but apparently standards have fallen. Or maybe she's just too stupid to know better. Lyric stepped out from behind Draven. I know exactly what I'm choosing. Isolde laughed sharp and cruel. You think you're special. You think you can handle what I couldn't. Look at you. You're what, 100 pounds, malnourished, scarred, branded like livestock. She moved closer, predatory. He'll destroy you, and when they find your broken body, everyone will finally see him for the monster he is. That's enough, Draven's voice didn't rise. Didn't need to. The air pressure in the room changed heavy with alpha dominance that made even Isolde pause. But she recovered quickly, emboldened by audience. Servants had gathered in the hallway, drawn by raised voices. Perfect witnesses. Is it because I think the kingdom deserves to know their king is risking the life of some Gatur-born Omega to satisfy his twisted needs? I think they deserve to know he's too dangerous to be allowed near civilized women. Lyric felt Draven tense beside her. Felt him preparing to back down to accept the accusation to prove Isolde right by retreating. She spoke before he could. You're pathetic. Isolde's head snapped toward her. Excuse me. You heard me. Lyric's voice stayed level cold. You're a coward who ran instead of trying, and now you can't stand that someone else had the courage you lacked. So you dress up your fear as concern and your jealousy as righteousness. Red flooded Isolde's perfect face. How dare you? I dare because I have nothing left to lose. You're terrified of losing face, losing status, losing the fiction that you're somehow superior. Lyric stepped closer, unafraid. Draven isn't the monster in this room. You are. At least he's honest about what he is. Silence fell like a hammer. Isolde's hand moved fast, aiming for Lyric's face. The slap never connected. Draven caught her wrist mid-swing, his grip iron, but controlled. Touch her again, he said quietly, and you will answer to me. Not as your king, as the man who has reached the absolute limit of his patience. He released her wrist. Isolde stumbled back, cradling her arm, even though he hadn't heard her. This isn't over. She fled, audience scattering before her like startled birds. Draven turned to Lyric, hands hovering near her shoulders, checking for damage. Are you hurt? Did she? I'm fine. Lyric cut what his hands held them. Better than fine. That felt amazing. A laugh burst from Draven, surprised and genuine. You're insane. Probably, but you're insane. The possessive sent warmth through his chest that had nothing to do with arousal and everything to do with belonging. Mine, he agreed softly. Then, is that okay for me to call Q that? Lyric pulled him down until their foreheads touched. Draven, I've been a possession my entire life. Owned by parents, by traffickers, by masters. But this, choosing to be yours while you choose to be mine, that's not ownership. That's partnership. He kissed her again, slow and thorough, uncaring that servants might still be watching. Let them. Let the whole kingdom see. This woman had defended him when no one else would. Had seen his worth when everyone else saw only his abnormality. If loving her made him weak, then he'd embrace weakness. They didn't know they were being watched. Didn't know Cassian stood in the shadows of an adjacent corridor taking note of everything. Didn't see the cold calculation in his eyes as he turned and walked away, plans already forming. The library became their sanctuary. Draven taught Lyric to read properly, his patience infinite, his pride in her progress obvious. She learned fast, driven by hunger for knowledge that had been denied her entire life. They spent hours surrounded by books, his deep voice explaining words she didn't recognize, her quick mind connecting concepts faster than he expected. Sometimes she'd read aloud to him, stumbling over complicated phrases, and he'd correct her gently, never making her feel stupid. You're better at this than half the nobles who've had tutors since childhood, he said one evening, watching her work through a complex historical text. They had the luxury of learning slowly. I need to learn fast. Why? She looked up from the page. Because knowledge is power, and power means I'll never be property again. Reading means I can understand contracts, laws, rights. No one can trick me if I can read what I'm signing. The determination in her voice made his chest ache. She'd survived hell and emerged focused on protecting herself from future hells. He wanted to promise she'd never need those protections, that he'd keep her safe forever. He said nothing. Promises meant nothing. Action did. 2 weeks after the confrontation with Isolde, Lyric got lost in the old wing. She'd been searching for the East Library, following Marin's directions to find a specific medical text. But the old wing was a maze of corridors that hadn't been properly maintained in decades, and she took a wrong turn somewhere between the 3rd and 4th floor. The hallways here were darker torches spaced farther apart. Tapestries hung moth-eaten and faded. The air smelled of dust and secrets. Lyric heard voices and moved toward them, hoping to ask directions. The voices came from behind a door slightly ajar, firelight flickering through the gap. She recognized Cassian's voice first. Smooth, cultured, the kind of voice that made lies sound like truth. The feast is in 6 days. Everything is arranged. And you're certain the poison will work as described, Isolde, her voice higher nervous. Lyric froze, pressed herself against the wall beside the door, barely breathing. Nightshade serum doesn't just kill, Cassian explained patiently, as if teaching a child. It triggers uncontrollable alpha rage. The subject becomes a mindless beast attacking anything nearby, especially the person they're closest to emotionally. So Draven will kill the Omega. Violently, publicly, in front of witnesses. A pause, then Isolde's voice colder now, and the kingdom will demand his execution. They'll beg for it. After they see what he's done to that girl, they will finally understand he's too dangerous to live. The council will have no choice but to declare him unfit. The Beta bloodline, my bloodline, will take the throne to restore order. Lyric's heart hammered so hard she was certain they'd hear it. She needed to move to run to tell someone, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. What about the girl? Isolde asked. She won't survive, obviously, but what if someone questions how she died? No one will. They'll be too horrified by what Draven became. A monster finally revealing his true nature. Poetic, really. Cassian's voice dripped satisfaction. I've been planning this for 5 years, Isolde. Every rejection you orchestrated, every bride I ensured would fail. All leading to this. Draven isolated, desperate, vulnerable. The Omega was an unexpected gift. He cares for her. That makes the betrayal perfect. You orchestrated the rejections. Not all of them. Some women genuinely couldn't handle his proportions. But brides 17, 18, and 19, they were going to try despite the warnings. I couldn't allow that. A successful bonding would have secured Draven's throne forever. Horror crashed over Lyric like ice water. You killed them. Isolde's voice trembled. Necessary casualties. They died quickly. Accidents that couldn't be traced to me. And each death reinforced Draven's belief that he was cursed, unlovable, broken. Cassian laughed, soft and vicious. I've been destroying my cousin piece by piece for half a decade. This is just the final blow. Lyric's hand flew to her mouth, smothering her gasp. She backed away from the door, careful, silent. 1 step, 2, 3. Her foot hit a loose stone. The scraping sound echoed. The voices inside stopped. What was that? Lyric ran. She fled through the old wing's corridors, taking turns at random, lost and panicking. Behind her footsteps, Cassian's voice calling for guards. She couldn't let them catch her, couldn't let them know she'd heard. She burst into a main corridor, nearly colliding with Thaddeus. The old advisor caught her shoulder, steadied her. Child, what's wrong? I need to see Draven. Now, it's urgent. Thaddeus took in her pale face, her shaking hands, her terrified eyes. He's at the northern border. Reports of raids. He left 2 hours ago with Ragnar and 50 soldiers. No. When will he return? Tomorrow evening, in time for the victory feast celebrating the resolved conflict. Tomorrow evening, the feast, the poison. Lyric's mind raced. She grabbed Thaddeus's arm. We need to send a message. He's in danger. Cassian and Isolde are planning. Slow down. Tell me everything. She did. Every word she'd heard, every terrible detail. Thaddeus's face grew graver with each sentence. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. These are serious accusations. Do you have proof? My word. Against a royal cousin and a noble lady, Lyric, I believe you, but the council won't, not without evidence. Then we find evidence. We search Cassian's rooms. We can't, not without cause, not without alerting him that we know. Thaddeus's mind worked quickly, decades of political experience sorting options. We send a message to Draven. Warn him not to drink anything at the feast. We'll station guards. Cassian has bribed the messengers. I heard him say it. Every rider, every carrier pigeon. He's covered every route. Thaddeus closed his eyes briefly. Then there's only one option. Lyric already knew. I have to go. I have to reach him before the feast. The northern camp is 18 miles through the Frostwood. You barely survived that forest once, and that was summer. It's late autumn now. Colder, more dangerous. I don't care. You'll die. Then I'll die trying. She pulled away from his grip, determination hardening her spine. Thaddeus caught her hand. Wait, if you're going to do this, at least let me help. Midnight found Lyric in the stables, dressed in clothes Thaddeus had stolen from the servants' quarters. Thick wool tunic, leather pants, boots lined with fur. A cloak, a small pack with dried meat water and bandages. And a dagger, small but sharp. Thaddeus had wanted to come with her. She'd refused. Someone needed to stay at the castle watch Cassian prevent the poisoned wine from being served if she didn't make it in time. He'd given her a map marked with the fastest route, 18 miles. If she ran hard, maybe 6 hours. The feast started at sundown tomorrow. That gave her 18 hours. She could do this, she had to. Lyric slipped out through the servant's entrance, the same one Draven used when he wanted to walk the forest alone. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was running through wilderness to save the man who'd saved her from wilderness. The frostwood waited dark and ancient and hungry. She ran. The first hour was manageable. Adrenaline pushed her forward, fear for Draven overriding physical discomfort. The map showed a path that skirted the worst terrain, following established trails. But trails were suggestions in the frostwood. Trees grew thick, blocking moonlight. Roots conspired to trip her. The temperature dropped steadily. The second hour she reached the Widow's Ravine. The gorge split the earth like a wound 100 meters deep, bridged only by a narrow path carved into the cliff face. In daylight, with proper equipment, it was dangerous. At night, with only a sliver of moon, it was suicidal. Lyric stood at the edge, looking down into darkness that had no bottom. Her breath misted in the cold air. She thought about Draven, about the way he knelt to wash her feet, about how he read to her with a voice full of warmth, about the careful way he touched her as if she were precious, about how Cassian planned to turn him into a monster and make him kill her. She started down. The path was slick with frost. Her feet slipped on the second step. She caught herself on an outcropping of rock, sharp edges cutting through her gloves. Pain bloomed across her palms. Keep going. Each step was negotiation with gravity. Her back pressed against the cliff wall, hands searching for holds. Below the ravine, waited patiently. Halfway across, she heard it. A voice. Draven's voice. "You're not worth this trouble. Why would I want someone so broken?" Hallucination. Had to be. Born of fear and exhaustion. But it sounded so real. "No," Lyric spoke aloud, defiant. "You chose me. You see me, and I won't let them take that away." The voice faded. She kept moving. By the time she reached the other side, her hands were shredded and bleeding. She wrapped them quickly in strips torn from her tunic, then ran. The third hour brought her to the frozen creek. The stream cut across the path, wider than she remembered. Ice crusted the edges, but the center still flowed fast and black. She'd have to cross. No way around. Lyric tested the ice with one foot. It held. She took a step. Another. The ice creaked ominously. The fourth step, it shattered. Cold swallowed her whole. The kind of cold that stops thought, stops breath, stops everything. She went under the current, grabbing her, pulling her downstream. Her heavy clothes turned to anchors. She broke the surface, gasping. Reached for the bank. Her numb fingers couldn't grip. The current dragged her under again. Draven's face flashed in her mind, his smile, his gentleness, his absolute certainty that he was unlovable. She would not let that be the last truth he believed. Lyric kicked hard, fought the current, clawed toward slower water. Her hand found a root jutting from the bank. She hauled herself up with strength she shouldn't have, adrenaline and stubbornness in equal measure. She collapsed on the frozen ground, shaking violently. Her clothes were soaked. The temperature had to be near freezing. Hypothermia would set in fast. She forced herself to stand, stripped off the wet outer layers, wrung them out as best she could with numb hands, put them back on because naked was worse, started moving to generate heat. Running now was stumbling, but she stumbled forward. The fourth hour, the wolves found her. They came silently, gray shadows between black trees. 5 of them, maybe more. Hard to count when everything was blurring. The alpha was massive, scarred eyes reflecting moonlight, the same pack from before. Lyric recognized the oak tree where she'd nearly died weeks ago. History repeating. The wolves spread out, cutting off escape. Lyric pulled the dagger from her belt with trembling hands. It looked ridiculous. A toothpick against predators. The alpha wolf growled low and menacing. Lyric didn't run. She was too tired, too cold, too close to her goal to die here. "I'm not afraid of you," she told the wolf. A lie, but sometimes lies were the only courage available. The alpha stalked closer, 10 feet, 5. Close enough that she could see scars crossing its muzzle, proof of a long life of violence. It lunged. Lyric threw herself sideways, slashing with the dagger. Felt it connect, heard the wolf yelp. Blood sprayed across snow. The pack snarled, circling tighter. She'd wounded their leader. They'd tear her apart for that. The alpha recovered, fury in its eyes now. It crouched, preparing for another attack. A horn blast shattered the night. Human voices. Torches in the distance. The wolves scattered, melting into forest shadows like they'd never been there. Thaddeus emerged from the tree line on horseback, 2 guards behind him. "I told you I was coming alone," Lyric said weakly, "and I ignored you." Thaddeus dismounted, threw his cloak over her shoulders. "Stubborn child, you're half frozen. No time, have to reach Draven. We will, together." He lifted her onto his horse with surprising strength for a man his age. "But we need you alive to warn him." The horse carried them through the forest, eating distance far faster than her feet could. Lyric clung to consciousness, to warmth from Thaddeus's cloak, to the single thought that kept her moving. Save him. Dawn broke gray and cold. Through the trees ahead, she saw smoke from campfires, heard men's voices. The northern military camp. And riding toward them on the forest road, flags flying, armor gleaming in weak sunlight, Draven's column returning to Ironhall. Lyric's heart seized. They were heading back. To the castle. To the feast. To poison and death and everything Cassian had planned. She slid off the horse before Thaddeus could stop her, stumbling into the road on legs that barely worked. The column was 50 yards away. 40. 30. Draven saw her and his face transformed. Horror, recognition, anguish. He was off his horse in seconds, running to her, catching her as her legs gave out completely. "Lyric, what happened? Who did this?" She looked at him through eyes swollen with exhaustion and cold, saw the fear in his face, the love he didn't know how to name. Words came out broken, gasping. "Poison, the wine, Cassian and Isolde. They'll make you kill me. Can't let them. Had to warn you." And then darkness took her, knowing she'd made it, knowing he was safe, knowing she'd chosen him over safety, over comfort, over her own life. And that was enough. Lyric woke to warmth. Real warmth, not the fever dream heat of hypothermia hallucinations. Silk sheets, a fire crackling somewhere close. The scent of pine and leather that meant only one thing. Draven. She opened her eyes. He sat beside the bed in a chair, pulled so close his knees touched the mattress. His elbows rested on his thighs, face buried in his hands. His shoulders shook with silent sobs. She'd never seen him cry. "Draven." His head snapped up. His face was wrecked. Eyes, red cheeks, wet expression caught between relief and anguish. "You're awake. Thank God you're awake." He reached for her hand, stopped himself, pulled back. Always restraining, always afraid. Lyric caught his hand before he could retreat, pulled it to her chest. His palm covered her heart, felt its steady rhythm. "I'm here. I'm alive. You ran through the frostwood, again." His voice broke. "You nearly died, for me. Why would you? Because you're worth saving." The simplicity of it shattered him. He collapsed forward, forehead pressing against their joined hands, and wept. Great heaving sobs that came from somewhere deep and ancient, a grief finally allowed to surface. Lyric stroked his hair with her free hand, let him break, let him feel everything he'd been holding back for 30 years. "I'm not worth this," he choked out. "I'm broken. I'm wrong. Everyone knows it. Everyone is wrong." She said it with such absolute conviction that he looked up, desperate to believe. "You don't understand what they're planning. The poison, it would have made me." "I know, I heard everything." She told him then every detail from the wine cellar conversation. Cassian's 5-year conspiracy, the murdered brides, Isolde's twisted love turned to vengeance, the nightshade serum designed to turn him into the monster they claimed he was. Draven listened, his expression shifting from grief to something colder, harder, the face of a king who'd reached his limit. "They wanted to use me to kill you," he said quietly. "Frame me as a beast, execute me, take the throne." "Yes, and you ran through hell to stop them. I couldn't let them win. I couldn't let them prove you're something you're not." Draven stood pacing the room like a caged predator. The physician had treated Lyric in his personal chambers. The largest bed, the warmest fire, every comfort he could provide. She'd been unconscious for 6 hours. Severe hypothermia, infected wounds on her hands and feet, exhaustion so profound she'd nearly stopped breathing twice. The physician said she'd live, said she was the strongest Omega he'd ever treated, said most people would have died in the ravine. Draven had sat vigil the entire time, refusing to leave, barely breathing himself until she woke. A knock at the door. Thaddeus entered, followed by Ragnar. Both men looked grim. "She's awake," Thaddeus said with obvious relief. "And talking," Lyric added. "Someone tell me what's happening." Ragnar crossed his arms, all business. "The feast is in 4 hours. Cassian thinks we're still returning on schedule, unaware of his plan. We have the element of surprise. We could just stab them," Ragnar offered helpfully. "We're not stabbing anyone," Thaddeus corrected with the patience of someone who'd had this argument before. "We need proof, public proof. These accusations require witnesses." Draven turned from the window where he'd been staring at the city below. Then we give them witnesses. We let the plan proceed, but we control it. Lyric pushed herself up despite her body's protests. You want to let them poison you? No, I want them to think they're poisoning me. We switch the wine. Replace the nightshade serum with something harmless. Plant loyal guards throughout the hall. His strategic mind clicked through details years of military training applied to court politics. Cassian will toast. I'll raise the cup. The entire court will hold their breath. And then, Lyric asked. Draven's smile was sharp enough to cut. Then I throw the wine in his face and watch him realize he's lost. Preparation happened fast. Thaddeus sent for servants he trusted, absolutely men and women who'd served the crown for decades. They searched Cassian's chambers, found the poison hidden in a locked cabinet, a vial of clear liquid that smelled faintly of bitter almonds. The physician analyzed it, confirmed it matched Lyric's description. Nightshade serum, highly concentrated, designed to trigger uncontrollable rage within minutes. Fatal to the drinker, catastrophic to anyone nearby. They replaced it with colored water, carefully measured to match the original volume. Put it back exactly where they'd found it. Cassian would never know. Meanwhile, Ragnar positioned 20 guards throughout the Great Hall. Veterans loyal to Draven, men who'd fought beside him in the Northern Wars. They wore ceremonial armor to blend in, but each carried real weapons. Ready. The feast was ostensibly celebrating the resolution of border raids. A convenient excuse to gather the court required attendance from every noble family. Cassian had planned this perfectly. Maximum witnesses to Draven's supposed monstrosity. It would be maximum witnesses to his downfall instead. Lyric insisted on attending despite the physician's protests. Draven had argued, begged her to rest, to let him handle this alone. She'd refused. They plan to use me as your victim. I'm standing beside you when they realize I'm your partner instead. So she dressed in a gown Thaddeus had commissioned. Deep crimson silk, the king's colors. Long sleeves to hide the bandages on her hands. The fabric draped to conceal how thin she still was, how recent her recovery. But she stood straight, head high, gray eyes fierce. Draven helped her with the clasp at her neck, his massive hands gentle against her skin. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. We're in this together. Remember partnership. He turned her to face him, cupped her face in his scarred palms. I love you. The words hung between them. First time he'd said them aloud. First time he'd dared. Lyric's smile could have lit the entire castle. I love you too. Now let's go show them what that means. The Great Hall blazed with torchlight and anticipation. 700 people packed the space. Every noble family, every council member, citizens lucky enough to receive invitations. The victory feast was tradition, celebration, spectacle. Tonight it would be justice. Draven and Lyric entered together. His hand at the small of her back, protective but not possessive. Her spine straight despite exhaustion. They looked like what they were, a king and his chosen partner. Whispers erupted. The court hadn't seen them together like this, publicly, claiming each other in front of witnesses. Cassian sat 3 seats down at the high table, his expression carefully neutral. But Lyric saw the calculation in his eyes, the way he tracked their movements. Beside him, Isolde wore ice blue silk and a smile sharp as broken glass. They thought they'd won. Let them. The feast began with traditional ceremony. Courses of roasted meat, fresh bread, winter vegetables preserved in honey. Musicians played, servants moved efficiently between tables. Everything normal, everything perfect. Lyric barely touched her food. Her stomach was twisted too tight. Beside her, Draven ate mechanically, going through motions. Under the table, their hands found each other. Squeezed. We can do this. 2 hours into the feast, after the main courses, after most guests were pleasantly drunk and relaxed, Cassian stood. He raised his wine cup, the traditional signal for the final toast. The hall quieted. My lords and ladies, honored guests. Cassian's voice carried smooth and authoritative. We gather to celebrate our king's victory at the northern borders, to honor his strength, his leadership, his dedication to Ironhall. Polite applause rippled through the crowd. But we also gather as family, and family tells hard truths when necessary. He paused, letting tension build. We've watched our king search for a mate for 5 years, 23 attempts, 23 failures. We've watched him grow isolated, distant, alone. Draven's jaw clenched. Lyric felt it through their joined hands. But tonight we also celebrate hope. The king has found companionship. Perhaps not in the traditional sense, but in this brave young woman who risked everything to stand beside him. The words sounded supportive, but Lyric heard the poison underneath. Brave meaning foolish. Risked everything meaning she didn't understand the danger. not traditional meaning improper. Cassian lifted his cup higher. So I propose a toast to family, to loyalty, to Ironhall's future, whatever form that may take. Servants moved through the hall, filling cups. The ceremonial chalice was placed before Draven. Ancient silver passed down through generations. The same cup used for every royal toast. Cassian had planned well. The poison was in the wine before it reached the cup. No one would question it. No one would suspect. Except Draven knew. Thaddeus had switched the wine hours ago. The hall waited. 700 people holding their breath. Draven stood slowly. Lyric stood with him, her hand still in his. He lifted the chalice with his free hand. The silver caught torchlight, gleaming. Cassian's eyes gleamed too. Anticipation. Victory so close he could taste it. Draven looked at his cousin across the table. Amber eyes met cold blue. A moment stretched eternal. Then Draven smiled. Not the careful, controlled smile he usually wore. Something wild, dangerous, free. To family, he said, his voice carrying to every corner. May traitors receive exactly what they deserve. He threw the chalice. Wine exploded across Cassian's face, the ancient silver clattering against stone. The hall erupted in gasps. Cassian stumbled backwards, shock replacing calculation. What are you, Arrest him. Draven's command cracked like a whip. Ragnar's guards moved instantly, surrounding Cassian before he could react. Two more grabbed Isolde as she tried to flee. What is the meaning of this? Cassian snarled, wine dripping from his hair. Have you gone mad? No. Lyric stepped forward, her voice clear and unwavering. But you wanted him to. She held up the vial. The real poison, the nightshade serum they'd found in Cassian's chambers. 3 nights ago, I overheard Cassian Ashenfell and Isolde Ravenmark plotting murder. They planned to poison the king's wine with this. She placed the vial on the table. Nightshade serum. It doesn't just kill, it triggers false alpha rage. The victim becomes uncontrollable, violent, targeting those they love most. The hall was silent now. 700 people transfixed. The plan was elegant, Lyric continued. Draven would drink. The rage would consume him. He would attack me in front of all of you. When you found my body torn apart, the kingdom would demand his execution, and Cassian would take the throne to restore order. Lies, Isolde shrieked. She's a gutter-born Omega with delusions of grandeur. Why would anyone believe? Because we have proof. Thaddeus stepped forward, holding documents. Ledgers showing bribes paid to messengers, guard servants. Letters between Cassian and Isolde discussing the plan in detail. And most damning, the physician's analysis of the poison found in Cassian's possession. Furthermore, Thaddeus's voice rang with authority. We have testimony from a palace servant who witnessed Cassian switching the wine barrels yesterday. She was paid to keep silent. She's recanted. A woman stepped forward from the crowd, trembling but determined. Cassian's face had gone pale. He looked at Draven with something like hatred. You're a freak, an abomination. You shouldn't be allowed to rule, to breed, to exist. I was doing the kingdom a favor by murdering innocent women. The question came from Draven, quiet and devastating. What, a bride 17, 18, and 19? They were going to triumph, going to accept me despite my proportions. But they died before the bonding could happen. Accidents, everyone said. Convenient accidents. Cassian's silence was confession enough. A woman in the crowd screamed, Lady Helena Northmere, mother of bride number 18. She lunged toward Cassian, hands curved into claws. Guards caught her. You killed my daughter. You murdered her because she was kind. She was weak, Cassian spat. They all were. Willing to lie with a monster for a crown. Disgusting. The words condemned him more than any evidence. Draven's voice cut through the chaos. You called me a monster, but I've killed in war honorably to protect this kingdom. I've never hurt someone who trusted me. I've never harmed the innocent. He stepped closer to Cassian, and though he didn't raise his voice, the alpha dominance that rolled off him made even guards step back. You murdered 3 women to satisfy your ambition. You planned to force me into killing the woman I love. You conspired to steal a throne you have no right to, and you dare call me the monster. The silence that followed was absolute. Isolde broke first, her composure shattering. I loved you. She turned on Draven, tears streaking mascara. I loved you, and my family forced me to reject you. They said your bloodline was polluted, that bonding with you would ruin our house. So I ran, and I've regretted it every day since. Her voice climbed to hysteria. But you replaced me with her, this nothing, this branded slave. How could you choose her over me? Lyric's response was quiet, almost gentle. He didn't choose me over you. He chose partnership over ownership. He chose someone who sees him over someone who sees a crown. Isolde collapsed sobbing. Guards hauled her to her feet. Draven turned to address the hall. Cassian Ashenfell, you are guilty of conspiracy to commit murder treason against the crown and the deaths of 3 innocent women. I hereby strip you of all titles and lands. You will be exiled to the frozen territories beyond the northern border. If you return, the sentence is death. And for Lady Isolde Ravenmark, Thaddeus added consulting documents, conspiracy to commit murder, attempted regicide, 20 years imprisonment, all property confiscated. The guards dragged them away. Cassian fought screaming about injustice. Isolde went limp broken. The hall remained silent until the doors closed. Then applause erupted. Not polite ceremonial clapping, real approval. Relief, justice witnessed and delivered. Draven stood in the center of it, looking overwhelmed. Lyric took his hand, anchored him. You did it, she whispered. You proved you're not what they said. We did it. You ran through hell to save me. I just finished what you started. The aftermath took days. Formal trials witnessed testimonies, legal proceedings that turned conspiracy into fact. Cassian was exiled within the week, sent north with nothing but the clothes on his back. Isolde was imprisoned in the southern fortress where she'd live out her sentence in isolation. The servant who'd witnessed Cassian switching the wine was pardoned and rewarded. Lady Helena received justice for her murdered daughter. The families of brides 18 and 19 received formal apologies and compensation. And slowly, carefully, the kingdom began to see their king differently. Not as a cursed monster, but as a man who'd been systematically destroyed by someone he trusted. A man who'd endured 23 rejections and still found the strength to love again. A man who'd shown restraint and discipline when he had every right to rage. 3 weeks after the feast, Draven made an announcement. The coronation would happen in 1 month. Not his coronation, he was already king. Lyrics, she would be his queen. Publicly, officially, forever. The court had opinions. Some negative, some positive, roll loud. Thaddeus silenced them with a simple statement. The king has chosen, and after everything, if you still question his judgment, you question your own ability to recognize worth when it stands before you. Lyric spent the month in a haze of preparation. Dresses fitted protocols, learned etiquette, mastered. She met with council members, noble families, merchants, guilds. Proved she was more than a rescued Omega. She was smart, strategic, compassionate. She understood logistics from years of survival. She knew medicine from the healing ward. She spoke to common people without condescension because she'd been one of them. And she loved their king with a fierceness that reminded everyone what loyalty looked like. The night before the coronation, Draven found her in the library, their sanctuary, where he'd taught her to read, where they'd fallen in love, surrounded by words and quiet. Are you nervous? He asked, settling into the chair beside hers. Terrified. We can still stop this. If it's too much, if you want a different life. Draven. She closed her book, turned to face him. I've been property slave victim. I've been nothing and no one. Tomorrow I become a queen. Not because I was born to it, but because I chose it. Because you chose me. That's not too much. That's everything. He pulled her into his lap, careful as always of his strength. She curled against his chest, fitting perfectly despite the size difference. I don't deserve you, he murmured into her hair. Stop saying that. You deserve everything. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the fire crackle, the distant sounds of the castle settling for the night. Tomorrow would be pageantry and ceremony. Tonight was just them. Lyric, I'm glad you didn't break. She smiled against his shoulder. I'm glad you didn't either. The coronation took place in the grand plaza, open to everyone. Nobles and commoners, alphas and omegas, anyone who wished to witness history. 2,000 people packed the square. Lyric walked barefoot by choice. Her feet had healed from the frostwood run, but the scars remained. She wore them proudly. Proof that love was worth bleeding for. Her gown was ivory silk, simple and elegant. No jewels, no excessive decoration. Just clean lines that flowed like water. Her hair hung loose, no elaborate styling. She looked exactly like herself. Draven waited at the altar in formal armor, polished to mirror shine. His dark hair was pulled back. His amber eyes found hers across the distance, and his smile was everything. Pride, love, awe. She walked to him through a pathway lined with winter roses. The crowd was silent, reverent. When she reached the altar, Draven took her hands. His massive palms dwarfed hers, scarred and gentle. The high priest began the ceremony, ancient words about duty and honor and service. Lyric barely heard them. She was too focused on Draven's face, the way he looked at her like she was the only person in existence. Then came the vows. They'd written their own. Draven spoke first, his deep voice carrying across the plaza. I vow to never let my strength become your cage. I vow to hold you gently, love you fiercely, and spend every day being worthy of the choice you made. I vow to see you always exactly as you are, my partner, my equal, my home. Tears streamed down Lyric's face. Happy tears, healing tears. Her turn. I vow to see you clearly always. Not the monster they imagined, not the crown you wear, but the man who made himself small so I could feel safe. I vow to remind you every day that you never have to shrink again. I vow to choose you in every moment, in every challenge, forever. Because you chose me first. The priest placed the crown on her head. Iron and silver, ancient and beautiful. The weight settled like purpose. By the authority vested in me, the priest proclaimed, I present to you Lyric Winters, Ashenfell, Queen of Iron Hall. The crowd erupted, cheering applause celebration that shook the plaza. Draven pulled her close and kissed her. Deep, passionate, uncaring that 2,000 people watched. Let them see. Let them witness that love wasn't about perfection or fitting or meeting expectations. It was about choosing someone and being chosen in return. When they broke apart, Lyric turned to face her kingdom, her people. No longer invisible, no longer property, no longer powerless. A queen. She raised her joined hands with Draven's, and the crowd's roar intensified. Somewhere in the back, an elderly woman who'd escaped Victor Cross's trafficking ring wept with joy. Somewhere, a young Omega saw possibilities she'd never imagined. Somewhere, a broken Alpha learned that different didn't mean wrong. And in the Palace Healing Ward, the physician who'd treated Lyric's hypothermia smiled and updated his notes. Patient Lyric Winters, Ashenfell. Status, fully recovered. Prognosis, excellent. Additional notation, early pregnancy detected. Mother and child both healthy. 6 months later, Lyric stood in the council chamber as her Omega Protection Act passed with unanimous support. No person could be bought, sold, or contracted as property. Trafficking was punishable by death. Victims received reparations and support. Victor Cross had been executed 3 months prior, his network dismantled, his victims freed. The council applauded as Lyric signed the act into law. Her hand rested on her swollen belly, 7 months pregnant now, carrying the air everyone said was impossible. The physicians had been wrong. Not about Draven's proportions, those were real, but about compatibility. When the two people loved each other enough, when they communicated and compromised and worked together, they found ways. Draven had been terrified of hurting her. She'd been patient. They'd gone slow. They'd learned each other's bodies with gentleness and care, and they'd discovered that love was the only measurement that mattered. After the council session, Lyric found Draven in the training yard, teaching young alphas discipline and control. Your strength is a gift, he told them, demonstrating a controlled strike. But only if you master it. Strength without discipline is just violence. Strength with control is power. The young alphas watched with reverence, their king teaching them not to be weapons, but protectors. Draven saw Lyric and his face transformed. Still, after all this time, she took his breath away. My queen, you should be resting. I'm pregnant, not broken. She took his offered arm. Besides, our daughter is restless. I think she wants to meet you. They'd learned the baby's gender last week. A girl, strong heartbeat, healthy measurements. The physician said she'd be large like her father. Lyric didn't care. She'd deliver her safely with the best medical care in the kingdom. They walked to their private garden, the one where Lyric had first defended Draven to the council, where he'd knelt before her, where she'd seen him truly. Evening sun painted everything gold. Draven guided her to a bench, sat beside her, placed his massive hand on her belly, felt their daughter kick against his palm. She's strong, he murmured, awed. She's ours. He looked at Lyric with eyes full of wonder. I never thought I'd have this. Family, love, purpose beyond the crown. You always had purpose. You just needed someone to remind you. They sat in comfortable silence, his hand on her belly, her head on his shoulder. Two people the world had deemed broken, proving that the only truth that mattered was the one they'd written together. In the castle below, servants prepared dinner. In the city beyond, citizens went about their lives, knowing their queen had been one of them, would always fight for them. In the northern territories, Cassian froze alone in exile, learning that ambition without honor led only to emptiness. And in the garden, a king and queen built a future one moment at a time. What are you thinking about? Lyric asked. Draven smiled. How you ran through the frostwood twice to save me. How you stood before the court and defended me. How you chose me when everyone said I was unchosen. And I'm thinking that I'm the luckiest man alive. Lyric laughed bright and free. Good, don't forget it. Their daughter kicked again, strong and insistent. Draven leaned down, spoke to Lyric's belly. Your mother is the bravest person I know. She taught me that being different doesn't mean being wrong. That size doesn't determine worth. That love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone perfect for you. Tears slipped down Lyric's cheeks. Tell her about strength. True strength. Draven continued, his voice gentle. Isn't the absence of power, it's the choice to control it, to protect instead of harm, to build instead of destroy. That's what makes someone strong. Lyric kissed him soft and sweet, tasting future and promise and forever. I love you, she whispered. I love you, both of you, always. As the sun set over Ironhall, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, the kingdom settled into peace. Not perfect peace, there would always be challenges, conflicts, change. But peace built on truth and justice, and the radical idea that everyone deserved to be chosen. And in the garden, a family prepared to welcome new life into a world they'd fought to make better. Together. 1 year later, Queen Lyric walked into the grand hall carrying her daughter, Princess Raven Ashenfell, 10 months old, already showing signs of her father's size and her mother's steel. She had Lyric's gray eyes and Draven's dark hair, and she was loved absolutely. A messenger approached, bowing. Your Majesty, another one. Another Omega seeking sanctuary, the 5th this month. Word had spread across the kingdom and beyond. Ironhall was safe. The Queen had been one of them. She understood. Lyric smiled. Prepare the guest chambers. I'll meet them in an hour. Draven appeared from a council session, saw his wife and daughter, and everything else ceased to matter. He crossed to them, kissed Lyric's forehead, took Raven into his arms. Hello, little one. Did you miss me? Raven grabbed his nose, giggling. He pretended to be mortally wounded, making her laugh harder. Lyric watched them, heart so full it ached. This man they'd called a monster was the gentlest father alive. This king they'd said was broken had built a kingdom on compassion. And she, the Omega, branded as property, stood as their queen, and proved that worth wasn't measured in status or perfection. It was measured in choice, in courage, in love. Ready for the next one? Draven asked, nodding toward where the new sanctuary seeker waited. Lyric took his hand, their rings catching afternoon light. Always. Together they walked forward into whatever came next, unbroken, unchosen by the world that wanted them small, but chosen by each other. And that was everything.